Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Data Enrichment and Site Analysis Workflows in ArcGIS Online. My name is Ian Greensmith, and I am a higher education analyst working in the Education and Research Group out of Esri Canada's Toronto office. Some housekeeping items before we get started. When you joined the webinar, you would have been prompted to join the audio broadcast. To listen in, you have two options. The preferred option is to dial in using the toll-free numbers provided on screen, or alternatively, if you cannot get to a phone, you can listen in using your computer speakers or headphones. For the best view of today's presentation and any demonstrations I'll show, you can click on the full screen button in the WebEx application to put the presentation into full screen mode. And at any point during the session, you can click the big blue return arrow button to return to the default view. Throughout this session, if you have any questions about the content being presented, please use the chat window to ask a question. Just when you're doing that, just be sure to choose Cameron Plouffe. He's moderating our session today. He's also identified as the host. So as you can see on screen, you just look for him and host beside that, type your question into the box and click send. We're going to collect questions at the any questions submitted at the end, and we'll try to answer them at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to type in your questions at any time, or if you'd rather email me offline, I'll have my contact information on the closing slides. Also note that this session is actually being recorded, so the recording and a PDF copy of the presentation will be made available after the webinar ends as well. ArcGIS Online is quickly becoming a powerful platform for spatial analysis. In this webinar, we will discuss how specific analysis tools can be used in both ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Maps for Office, a Microsoft Office add-in that allows you to create, analyze, and publish content directly from Microsoft Excel. Specifically, we will focus our discussion on an analysis workflow using data enrichment and location analysis tools that measure similarity between locations to solve a problem using sample data. Let's move into our first section and make sense of where these analysis tools fit compared to existing tools in the ArcGIS platform that you may already be familiar with. Now, if you attended any of our webinars that we've run over the past few weeks, the first few slides might be a little bit of a review, but that's okay. Sometimes going through things again can be a bit of a refresher and can ultimately be beneficial as well. The ArcGIS platform has a number of different components. And you may have seen this diagram on the slide in the past. While the desktop is still the common application where spatial analysis takes place, a lot of the same analysis tools you are already familiar with in desktop are now available in ArcGIS Online. As I mentioned earlier, ArcGIS Maps for Office allows you to create, analyze, and publish content directly from Microsoft Excel. Excel is a desktop application, and this desktop application specifically consumes online content and services made available through ArcGIS Online. So for this webinar, we're going to focus on the following tool sets. And these are the Enrich Data toolset and the Find Locations toolset. And during the webinar, we're going to talk about, or I'll introduce some comparable tools that you may already be familiar with across the ArcGIS platform. Access to ArcGIS Online requires an identity. Your identity is your passport, where through a username and a password, you can access and interact with online content and tools from multiple devices, just as the diagram on the previous slide suggests. With your identity comes a role, and that role defines your specific privileges. Privileges that are needed to be able to perform spatial analysis include the ability to create and publish items. Items are hosted services or hosted features within ArcGIS Online. In addition to that, you're going to also need access to premium content, depending on what you or your students are trying to accomplish. For this webinar, we're going to assume that you have sufficient privileges to be able to perform analysis, either through a publisher or a custom role that has been assigned to you. I want to quickly comment on credits at this stage. Service credits, as you may know already, are the currency used by ArcGIS Online to perform specific tasks. Credit quotas can be assigned based on the named user, at the group level, or even at a higher up role level, which is actually ideal for class assignments and general credit management across the universities or colleges subscription. Now in ArcGIS Online, analysis tools are most commonly accessed from the map viewer. However, some of these tools can be accessed directly from ArcGIS Desktop and ArcGIS Pro. In Desktop, as you may already be familiar, you access two folders. You access My Hosted Services and the ready-to-use services from the catalog window. This provides you access to any online content that you've shared with ArcGIS Online, in addition to some of the analysis tools. With regards to ArcGIS Pro, the same analysis tools that you can access in Online, in Desktop, are even available in Pro, and you access those through the Analysis tab. ArcGIS Pro is built with web mapping in mind, so you'll be able to access the suite of tools just as you would see them in Online right within that application as well. Even apps like the app I'm going to showcase today in our webinar, ArcGIS Maps for Office, or custom-built ones built with the Web App Builder, can use these analysis tools as well. I want to quickly also note, for those of you who have an interest in Portal for ArcGIS or are already using it, Portal is the on-premise equivalent of ArcGIS Online, which can be accessed from the applications mentioned above, and can also be configured to use utility services from ArcGIS Online based on a user's ArcGIS Online identity. So with that kind of brief talk about how we access the analysis tools, I thought I'd just reinforce this slide just by showing you with a quick tour of the software. So we'll start here in ArcGIS Online, just at our home page. I can click on the sign-in link here. Now my browser is going to remember my username and my password, and for this webinar, this is more than okay. So I can click on Sign In. This is going to take me into the Education and Research subscription. You see the unique URL at the top in the web browser. Now, to access the analysis tools, that's all done through the map itself. So I click on Map, wait for my screen to refresh, and now you'll see here I have an Analysis tab. I click on that, and here, just as I had in the screenshot on the slides, I have access to all of these tools, and if I want more information about them, I can click on this blue information icon and find out more information about it. And the further you go into the tool, if you need help on how to use the tool, you'll find references to that as well. If we change gears and go into Desktop, or ArcMap rather, I mentioned that there are two folders that you can use to access online services or online tools. And these are your My Hosted Services and your ready-to-use services. But I'm showing ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro in this order for a specific reason. In ArcMap, you need to authenticate in. You need to sign in to ArcGIS Online. And you do that from the File menu, choose Sign In. You'll see a recurring pattern here as well. So I'll be typing in the same username and password as we go along. But as soon as I authenticate into ArcGIS Online, I have a series of tools available to me. I can click on any of these tools and get access to additional information. In this case, tools related to elevation. But if I clicked on My Hosted Services, then you would see all of these services that I have available, or that I have stored within ArcGIS Online. Now, in ArcGIS Pro, you actually are signed in by default. And the way that works is that ArcGIS Online manages the licenses for ArcGIS Pro. So you can't actually open ArcGIS Pro without having a license allocated to you by your school's ArcGIS Online administrator. So that's what I wanted to show you here first. And because you're signed in, you have access to your portal content, or all your content. And here I just happen to have a number of folders stored here. But if I wanted specific content that was shared with a group, I could click on my group icon here and just wait for the screen to refresh, and I would also find that information as well. So here we go, and you can see the groups here. The last thing I want to show you relates to the analysis tab. So this is where we can find all of our geoprocessing functions, whether it's here or under the geoprocessing tab, much like in ArcMap. With our toolbox can be toggled and docked off to the side. We can search for tools here. I want to finish actually in Microsoft Excel, which in and of itself is a powerful spreadsheet application that some of you may already be comfortable with. And we're going to be doing a lot of work here. To access ArcGIS Online from this application, there's a separate add-in that needs to be installed, and this is what I was referring to in the slides. This is ArcGIS Maps for Office. But you sign in, once it's installed, you sign in the exact same way. So once I'm signed in, you won't see anything different, but now I have the ability to add a map, and that's actually how we're going to start. So I'll click on Add a Map. It's going to add a map into my spreadsheet. And I'll leave it there because I want to come back to this exact same spot in our next demonstration. So I'll transition back to the slides, and we'll pick up and start our analysis workflow. So the next few slides are going to walk us through really an analysis workflow, and I mentioned this in the outline as well. The workflow that we're going to be focusing on will focus on data enrichment and location analysis tools to model the expansion potential of the Starbucks coffee and tea chain in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The workflow that's on screen here is actually akin to the geographic inquiry model, which some of you might be familiar with. It's no different than other methods of inquiry. But the geographic inquiry model, I bring it up because it starts by asking a spatially loaded question, a geographically loaded question, acquiring data, examining that data, performing some type of analysis, and then acting on your results, whether that's sharing it or using that as the basis for further research. So with our focus defined, we must first evaluate what data we need to answer this question. There are various supported layers, that is, data types and services that can be used as inputs in an analysis tool in ArcGIS Online. And these range, it's quite right. And so you can see on screen that it range from feature services. These are feature services that are either hosted on ArcGIS Online or published through ArcGIS for Server, ranging through to text files and shape files that you may already be comfortable with, to something as simple as graphics, simple graphics that are added to the map in the form of map notes. In this webinar, our workflow begins by connecting to ArcGIS Online from ArcGIS Maps for Office, where the .xlsx file extension is the only supported file extension for this add-on. It's worth noting, though, that tables are a supported item in ArcGIS Online, but just be sure that if you're going to be taking advantage of this add-in, that any text file, CSV file, or other table-based or worksheet-based file format is just converted to .xlsx file format. For the purposes of this webinar, we're going to use data from two known sources. The first one is Starbucks locations. For that, I downloaded data from the Starbucks website and formatted it into an Excel spreadsheet. Included with the store location are fictitious sales volume data. And the second source is actually data that lives directly within ArcGIS Online. This data is provided by Environics Analytics and is based on Statistics Canada's geographic boundaries. So with our data downloaded, we now need to decide how we're going to add that data to the map. When publishing content, you have a few options that are actually available to you. As I had mentioned before, we're going to be working in Microsoft Office, and we're going to be using it to geocode addresses directly within Excel. But outside of that, I could add data easily to my map viewer. But if I was already comfortable with the workflow that I had for ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro, I could publish directly from there. Or if I wanted to circumvent all of the three options I just mentioned, I could just log into ArcGIS Online, and right from my content window, I could upload and publish content right from there. Now, any content that you add into ArcGIS Online, specifically into a map, you will be faced with some of the following visualization options. First one relates to setting symbology and any classification that comes along that could better explain your data, or that could better use to better visualize your data. There are new smart mapping capabilities that we've been talking about for a while and posting to on our higher ed listserv that you can take advantage of. But sometimes it's not a good idea to accept the defaults and accept it as is. And we've got a few resources coming out later this year that are going to help clarify that. Still a great tool, still a great functionality, but something to keep your eye out for if you're interested more in smart mapping. Beyond that, pop-ups can be configured for your data as is shown on the screen. The analysis tools specifically take your map extent into consideration. So that's something for you to consider regardless of where you're working. And then related to that, we also have bookmarks. So if you had multiple study areas, for example, you can set all that up within your map and continue on with your analysis workflow. The first step in our analysis workflow is to visualize the information contained in the Excel spreadsheet. In order to add street data to our map, we need to geocode the addresses in the table. You'll recall that geocoding converts a series of street addresses to X and Y coordinates and appends the result to an existing record in the database. Now, compared to traditional desktop geocoding workflow where an address locator and reference data may exist locally, whether it could even be on a USB key or on your laptop, when you're geocoding in ArcGIS Online, it's a little bit different because you reference, or what you will ultimately reference, is one of two things. You'll reference the World Geocoding Service, or you're going to reference a custom geocode service that's been published through ArcGIS for Server. So with that, I'm just going to jump back to Maps for Office and show you a little bit more of how we can get our tabular data onto the map. So as I mentioned, I was going to just I left off here, and I left off here for a reason. When you add data into the map, you're presented with a few different options. The first one, the recommended way to do it, is to have pre-constructed tables within your Excel worksheets. So, and that's what I've done here. So I can actually go into my table view. Let's go into my table view and see here that I've named my table existing. So it's picked up two tables that exist within my document. Beyond that, if I didn't have a named table, I could use a cell range or a named range as well if I wanted to do that. But for our purposes, what I want to do is actually just leave it at existing, click OK. And then I want to walk you through how it actually goes about adding the data. So we've already identified the data source. Beyond that, in my table itself, I have address data, and as I mentioned, I have that sales volume data as well. Maps for Office will recognize an address field, or actually will even recognize coordinates as well if you have them. Alternatively, if you had unique identifying codes for provinces, electoral districts, census divisions, and more, you could use that as well and point ArcGIS Online directly to it. So I've got my data, my location type, and how I'm going to style it or add symbology to the map. I've got that all set up. I'm going to add this to my map. Now, I could easily just keep going here, but what I want to mention is that if you had, with this geocoding operation complete, if there were any errors, you would be prompted to fix them right away, similar to what you would have experienced in ArcGIS Online, in the ArcGIS.com website, or in ArcMap, or even in ArcGIS Pro. Of the 18 records that were geocoded, there were no errors, so those have all been added to the map. What I want to do now is I actually have I have two worksheets, if you remember. So I actually want to geocode my candidates layer as well. So to do that, it's more or less retracing your steps. So from Excel, identify candidates. But this time I don't have, there is no sales volume data associated with it, but I can confirm that my data and my location type are set. Click Add Data, and now my additional 3 records are going to be added to the map. And one last thing before we switch back, I'm just going to change my symbology here just so they're a little bit easier to see on the map. There, and just like that, I've added content into my map from two different worksheets. Before I transition back to the map, I'm just going to clean this up here, just so, because map 2 is not the most descriptive title, but you could name it anything you wanted related to the map, related to the work that you're doing. So I'll click Apply, and I will transition back to the slides. So now that we have our data in our map, we can now investigate some of the enrichment capabilities to further our analysis workflow. Data enrichment itself enables you to answer new questions about your study area that you may previously not be able to answer with your existing data. Some examples can include what kind of family lives in an area? What does this family like to do? Or what do families within this area like to do? What are their habits? What are their lifestyles? All of that type of information can be gathered from directly within ArcGIS Online, or in this case within Maps for Office. Now conceptually, the data enrichment process is similar to a spatial join that you have access to both in ArcGIS Desktop and ArcGIS Online. The only difference here is that you're enriching your local data. So in this case, it's my existing stores and my candidate stores with data that's not on disk. I'm enriching it using a service. So that's just something to keep in mind. 2 enrichment options exist that we'll focus on in this webinar. The first is infographics. Infographics are temporary visualizations that provide contextual information about the areas surrounding the features in your map that appear ultimately in a pop-up. I say temporary in that the information that's contained within the infographic is only available in the pop-up or while the pop-up is open and it's not saved locally. If you were looking for a more permanent solution, then you would turn to the Enrich Layer tool, which actually appends demographic and lifestyle variables you select to your existing data. And there are actually a couple ways to do this. One way, and that's what I'll show you in today's webinar, is through Maps for Office, where this new information is added as new fields in an existing layers attribute table. And then another way to do it is actually directly through the ArcGIS Online Map Viewer, where essentially the same process occurs as I described above, but the output is a new hosted feature layer. When enriching point data within Maps for Office, you also must define the data collection method for which you want information by choosing one of the following. Ring, drive times, and distance. Those are your 3 options. The ring returns information within a specified radius. Drive times return information for an area within a specified number of minutes for drive time that you select, and then similar to drive time or drive distance, returns information within a specified area for a specified distance, and you have complete control over what the units of measurement are for that. So let's jump out back into Maps for Office here. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how the enrichment works. So in Maps for Office, the infographics are configured through the layers pop-up information, and as I mentioned earlier. If I click on a point here in downtown Halifax, I see the same information that's readily available here in my worksheet. When you access the infographics button, when you actually click on it, what ArcGIS Online will do is aggregate the surrounding demographic information on your map and produce an infographic containing information such as household size, an age distribution via population pyramid, and household income for a set distance in and around your location. And in this case, they're referring to Starbucks locations. But the default is actually a 1 mile ring, and what I want to do is I want to configure my infographic to only look at for specific drive times. And in that, I want it to be a 3-minute drive time. Now, 3-minute drive time can represent the maximum time that someone in that area may be willing to drive to get a cup of coffee, but at the same time, we'll also capture those who are close or within that 3-minute drive time distance who are close enough to walk. While this is updating, it's also worth noting that the attributes and infographic options are persistent. So if credit consumption is a concern for you, it's a good practice to revert to the attribute display. So what that means is just to click back to here, as opposed to leaving it on the infographic itself, because the infographics themselves consume service credits, and if you want more information on that, I can direct you to that after the webinar. Now, if you want to permanently append the same type of information, you're better off, as I mentioned earlier in the slides, you're better off using the Enrich Layer tool. So let's actually go through a process where we would enrich both data sets. And to do that, we just click on the Enrich Data tool. And here, just like for those of you who are experienced with Community Analyst Online or Business Analyst Online, the dialogue is very similar. So you essentially identify the layer you're looking to enrich. I want to enrich my existing sites first, and then you go through the process of choosing your variables. For me, and the work that we're doing here today, I'm specifically interested in a couple of population variables, an income variable, and a spending variable. For population, I'm interested in daytime population and total population for that area. For income, I'm interested in household income, specifically the median household income for the most current year. And then finally, for my spending variable, because this is a coffee shop, I'm interested in a food spending variable, but specifically that purchases that are non-alcoholic in nature and any other food purchase. So hopefully these 4 variables will capture what we're trying to do in this trade area. I can hover my cursor over the top right here and confirm that my variables are here. If I wasn't comfortable with one variable, if I selected one variable in error, I can just exit out here and it would go away. But I'm happy with that so far. Before I actually add my data to my system, similar to the infographic, I need to edit how the data is actually collected. And to do that, I just go here through the edit menu. From the drop-down menu, select drive times and capture that 3-minute window that we were working with before. Also note, similar to, and I would have mentioned this in other webinars that you may have attended as well, that ArcGIS Online will, or specifically ArcGIS Maps for Office will pre-calculate the number of credits required to perform a specific task. So you can, if you're interested in that, you can see here that for the 4 variables that I'm enriching across the 18 existing sites, I'm consuming just under 10 credits. So I'll let this run, and it doesn't take very long, but just something to keep in mind if you're showing this to your colleagues, or even if you're showing this in class, that there will be a little bit of a lag as data gets enriched, but it doesn't actually take that long. And you can see here, if I'll just grab my map out of the way, I have my daytime population, non-alcoholic beverages, median household income, and then my total population. What I want to do here is I actually want to replicate that. I'm going to repeat this process, but for my candidate sites. So again, enrich data, select the appropriate data set, or in this case, the layer, and grab my 2 population variables, my 2015 median household income variable, and then finally my spending variable to make sure it's consistent between the 2 data sets. And you'll see when I get to the location analysis tools why it's necessary for the fields to match exactly. So I confirm that, click next. Again, change my drive times, and add that to the system as well. So for 4 variables across 3 locations, it only consumed a little over, just under 2 service credits. And I can drag the map out of the way, and I can see this the same information that we would have seen earlier. Now, at this point, and really before moving on, if it's desirable, you really should consider taking the time to perform a simple market analysis on the existing sites. And I say that because by generating a number of rates, whether it's sales in terms of per capita, so whether it's related to sales, whether it's related to population, or whether it's related to income, those rates themselves that you calculate can be used as a method of ranking the best performing stores that currently exist. However, just for this webinar and the time that we have, we're just going to look at the enriched attributes themselves on the map. So that's the enrichment process. Let's just switch back to our slides and continue on with our analysis workflow. So we've enriched our data based on drive time areas, and the next part of our workflow is to actually share that content that we've created in ArcGIS Online. Now, conceptually, the process is identical to adding data and the publishing steps that I've discussed in an earlier slide. The only difference is that each layer in your Excel map is added as an item, or a separate item rather, in ArcGIS Online, in addition to a new web map created that contains those 2 layers. In ArcGIS Maps for Office, this is actually an efficient way to share data compared to ArcGIS Desktop and ArcGIS Pro, where in a given map document or in a project file, all layers included within that map are published as one layer or service. So what I thought I'd do is I just switch back to Maps for Office and show you the sharing workflow. And just as the screenshot that I showed you on the previous slide suggests, you can just click on Share Map, and here a dialog appears where I can give it a name, a tag, and in this case I can decide who I want to share it with, but at this stage in our workflow, I'm just going to choose to share it with everybody within my organization. Click Share, and now what's happening is the same content that's already been created and within Maps for Offices is being shared with ArcGIS Online, and the end result is going to be 2 new items and a web map that contains both those 2 items. So as you can see here on screen, the sharing is complete, and if I switch back to ArcGIS Online now and refresh my screen, I'm going to have 3 new items. There we go. So that completes our sharing workflow. So let's jump back to our slides, and now it's time to go in a bit of a different direction, but still take advantage of the enriched data. So now that our data is shared in ArcGIS Online, the next step in our analysis is to attempt to compare candidate sites to a reference location with similar demography. To do this, we can turn to the Find Locations toolset, where the Find Similar Locations tool is well suited to measure the similarity of candidate locations to one or more existing reference locations. Now, conceptually, there are 2 tools in ArcGIS Desktop that are comparable to the Find Similar Locations tool. These are the Similarity Search tool found in the Spatial Statistics toolbox and the Rank Similar Sites tool available within Business Analyst Desktop. These tools compare and score potential new sites against a known, well-performing site called a master site. But for our purposes, we just refer to it as a reference, or our reference location. So let's jump back to ArcGIS Online now and see how this tool works. So I'm back in ArcGIS Online, and I can open my same map. It's going to be the exact same map that I was looking at in Maps for Office. I have the exact same layers, but before I actually go on and use the tool, I need to identify our reference location. And to identify the reference location, we need to review the enriched attributes of both the candidate and the existing locations. So looking at the attributes of the candidates themselves, you can see if I just by clicking on the pop-ups here, you can see that these areas are predominantly residential. And so the 2 fields that I'm looking at relate to daytime population compared to total population. And the same goes if I click on this Sackville location. I have a daytime population still relatively high compared to the total population. So meaning that these communities or these areas are really not commuter suburbs. And even the one down here in Spryfield is still relatively large compared to the total population. Now, ahead of this webinar, I've had the opportunity to rank the existing sites and identify a good reference location, and that's this location here. This is our Larry Utek and Southgate location, where not just based on population, but also based on additional attributes, this location would serve as a very good reference location to help us identify a new candidate site, as it's performing quite well. So with that in mind, what we'll do now is we'll open the Analysis tab, click on Find Locations, and then click on Find Similar Locations. And this now is really a 6-step process. So we know what our 2 inputs are. We know what our reference location is. Now it's just a matter of connecting the dots. So I'll select my existing location. I'll identify my reference location just by selecting it. Alternatively, I could filter it, or if this was all in one data set, I could actually just do the same processing, just filter out based on the unique value. So I've selected it. Now I'm going to compare this. I'm going to look for similar locations in my candidate site based on the 4 variables that I enriched earlier. Now I have the option for it to give me back all the locations, or just the top one. But I'm just interested in seeing how they all rank. I'll accept my default name, accept my default working directory, and before I click Run Analysis, I'm just going to confirm the total number of credits being consumed. And you can see here for the 2 data sets, that's 3 candidate sites and 18 existing sites. You're consuming, it's a negligible amount of 1 credit that you're consuming. But once this is confirmed, then you can just click on Run Analysis. Oh, that's why. Has the same name. So we'll just choose that. We'll let this run. And what you're going to see now is it'll return a new host feature layer with 4 points, because you're comparing it to the layer UTech and Southgate location. You're comparing the 3 candidate sites against that. So we'll let this run, and then we'll be able to move on with our workflow. There we go. And if based on our legend here and our reference location, the enriched data that we've appended to both the candidate and the existing sites, it looks as though the Sackville location is the most similar to our Larry UTech to our Larry UTech existing site. So a pretty powerful tool that really just requires attribute information to be identical within both data sets as it searches for similarity. So with that clarified, we'll just save our work here, and we'll transition back to our slide and move on. So a final step in our analysis workflow will be to review your results, and in the end, ultimately, decide how best to share them. In this case, based on the reference location we identified, the candidate site that is most similar based on the variable selected is the Sackville location. So we can take that information and move forward in our workflow. Ultimately, at this point, you need to decide what your next steps are, whether you share your results or not. There are options available to you, like sharing the features through a series of different web maps via story maps, exporting the raw data, or creating a web mapping application. And as discussed in the previous slide, we can do this in a couple of different ways. For our purposes, we're going to share our web map in layers through a configurable web application template, specifically the summary viewer. Now, this is an application that summarizes the numeric attributes of features of a layer that are within the visible map area. Referring back to our existing and candidate site data, we can use this app to share our results with senior management as evidence to support a decision to open a new Starbucks location within the Halifax region. So the last demonstration, what I want to do is I just want to walk you through how this application can be configured. Okay, so back in ArcGIS Online, we've saved our work. As you may already be familiar with, if we're going to create an application, whether it's through one of the default application or one of the sample templates or through our web application builder, the first thing you need to do is you need to share it. And since I've shared my candidates, my existing sites, and my web map, all with the education and research group's subscription, this perpetuates, and it just makes a lot of sense for this to happen. Once I confirm the sharing options, I can click on Create a Web App, and the summary viewer itself is stored under the following category, under this Explore and Summarize Data category. So I have that, and I just click on and select Summary Viewer, click Create App. I can accept the defaults here. These are the exact same defaults that I have for my web map as well. So I'll click Done, and the next thing it's going to do is it's going to create the map, or create the web app rather, And what I get back is really some configuration options. Now, because I've pointed it to my web map already, this is the map that's selected. If I didn't like this one, or if I had a different one, if I was iterating through this analysis, for example, trying to see based on different variables, for example, I could have different web maps and select them. So that's the map tab. The next tab is just a general tab where I can configure the look and feel. And to do that, I've got some text here that's off screen that I'm just going to copy and paste in. So I have a title. I have a logo URL. And ahead of time, I looked up the hex code for Starbucks. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste that in here. So now, at least look and feel of what people might expect for a given organization's brand, the brand of an organization, that can be configured here quite easily. Beyond that, this is where you actually point the application to a specific data set. Now, remember in our web map, we have 3 layers. We have our 2 sites and then the results of our similarity analysis. For this one, I actually want to point it to my candidate site. And my candidate site, I have a number of fields. Now, this is just an odd feature of how this application is configured. But what I'm going to do is I will actually switch back and forth between the Excel my Excel document, my spreadsheet rather, and just to show you the field names. Specifically, just working our way from top to bottom, F1 represents our name. So if I go back to Excel here, F1, so field 1 represents name, and beyond that I have 10 fields. So, and the fields that I enriched start at field 7, so 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's really what I'm going to be configuring the application based on. So for the field I want to summarize, I specifically want to summarize the daytime population. I'm going to average out the food that's or non-alcoholic beverages and other foods that are purchased. And then from a minimum and max fields, I'm going to point it towards my median income, which is F9. And if you're worried that this application is just going to show F1, F7, F8, F9 across the template, it doesn't do that. It's just an odd feature that hopefully is resolved in the near future. But I can save, I can view this map, or app rather, and here you can see that I indeed am not looking at specific field header in terms of F7 and so on. I actually have the actual names. So I'm happy with that. It also updates based on extent. But if I wanted to specifically look at the Sackville location, then you'll see here that the summary viewer refreshes. So I have a total daytime population of 3,800 for this aggregated area. So that's the 3-minute drive time, don't forget. So maybe actually if I were to do this again, or if you were to continue on this analysis, it'd be good to include the 3-minute drive time as well in this application. And then beyond that, we have our non-alcoholic beverages and food, and then median household income. And all that is stored within the items, or within the items of ArcGIS Online. So you'll see here, I'll just go back to my content, and I now have 5 items. I have my find similar layer, which if I click on that, I'll actually be able to see all my some relative statistics for each field, which is actually also useful. But then I also have my input layer, so my candidates existing, my web map, and then ultimately what powers the application, which ultimately powers the application. So with that, let's wrap up the webinar just by reviewing our workflow one more time. So we started by geocoding our existing and candidate sites and enriching them with variables based on a 3-minute drive time. Then, once we shared our content in ArcGIS Online, we identified a reference location for candidates to be compared to using the Find Similar Locations tool. And then finally, we shared our results through our summary viewer. So to sum up our discussion today, there are a number of tools available in ArcGIS Online that you can use. Specifically, we focused our discussion on some of the data enrichment and location analysis tools available both in the Enrich Data and Find Locations tool sets. Now, with these concepts and workflows, or really this workflow shown today, you should be able to apply them to your own project work in the future. I want to remind you about some upcoming webinars being offered by both Esri and Esri Canada over the next couple of months. So keep your eyes peeled for more information if these webinars are of interest. A great starting point for resources that we talked about today are found in the Esri help documentation. Esri is actually quite good at communicating any planned changes so that their user community stays well informed. Also, something that I really like is the desktop analysis page. So actually, have a look at the online help first, and then check out the desktop analysis page. I like it because it actually contains case studies, and these case studies provide examples that really show how analysis can be carried out using both ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Desktop. So if you're a student, you're trying to piece all this together, or even if you're an instructor or a prof trying to figure out how this can be integrated into your classroom for intersession or even for the fall, by all means check out the case studies. For some homegrown Canadian examples, I invite you to check out Esri Canada's Lesson Planner. Now, if you're unfamiliar with our lesson planner, you will find a wide range of learning resources that relate to what we have discussed today. Whether you're looking for desktop, online, or solution-focused resources, the tools built in the search functionality allow you to quickly refine and find a learning resource that you can use. The second and third link that you see on screen there relate to tutorials that build on the workflows discussed in today's webinar. So I invite you to take some time to review both of those links. On behalf of Esri Canada, I want to thank you for attending today's webinar. Please, I have my contact information there, so please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And now we'll take a look to see if any questions have been asked within the chat panel.